λόγια. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση να είμαι εδώ σήμερα μαζί σας και βέβαια να συγχαρώ για τη διοργάνωση. Θα θέλαμε όλοι να είμαστε εκεί. Δεν θα κάνω πλήρη προβολή, διότι όταν κάνω πλήρη προβολή για κάποιο λόγο δεν γυρίζουν οι διαφάνειες, οπότε θα γυρίσω έτσι τις διαφάνειες στο χέρι. And I will deliver my presentation in English. So my presentation today focuses on teaching Greek as a heritage language. So the purpose of this presentation.
Δεν σε ακούμε, μάλλον κατά λάθος πατήθηκε το κουμπί της σιγάνσης, οπότε unmute yourself. Δεν σε ακούμε. Ωραία.
Τώρα ακούς? Τώρα ακούτε?
Ναι.
Okay, συγγνώμη, ναι, μάλλον πατήθηκε κατά λάθος το κουμπί. Έλεγα λοιπόν, ευχαρίστησα θερμά την Οργανωτική Επιτροπή για την πρόσκληση να είμαι μαζί σας εκεί. Θερμά συγχαρητήρια για τη διοργάνωση. Θα θέλαμε να είμαστε όλοι μαζί στο Βελιγράδι, αλλά δεν τα καταφέραμε. Ελπίζουμε σε ένα επόμενο συνέδριο. And I will deliver my speech in English. So my presentation today focuses on teaching Greek as a heritage language. And the purpose of this presentation is to present the development phases of a new community-based curriculum for teaching Greek to Greek heritage language learners in the United States, and also highlight its characteristics and novelties. I said that I won't have the full screen mode in Zoom, because when I do that, I can turn the slides smoothly. So I will start with an overview of what is heritage language speakers, and also give some information about Greek heritage language speakers in the United States. I will then briefly talk about the Greek heritage language corpus, which was an important resource for curriculum compilation. Then I will go through a literature review about the issues raised in teaching a heritage language. I will justify then why we knew a need curriculum for teaching Greek as a heritage language, and I will finish with the presentation of this new curriculum for teaching Greek as a heritage language, framework for teachers. That's exactly how it is called. And also I'll talk about its creation, characteristics, and novelties. And I start with a basic question: which are the defining traits of heritage speakers, and what is a heritage language? A heritage language, of course, is a minority language, either immigrant or indigenous, learned by its speakers at home as children, and difficult to be fully developed. Why? Because of insufficient input from the social environment. The heritage speakers grow up with a different dominant language in which they become more competent, and some scholars speak of a continuum of heritage language that ranges from fluent speakers to barely speaking individuals of the home language. The term heritage speaker may also refer to the language of a person's family or community that the person does not speak or understand, but identifies with culturally. So, heritage speakers have a fluent command of the dominant language and are comfortable using it in informal setting because of their exposure to the language through formal education. Their command of the heritage language, however, varies widely. Some heritage learners may lose some fluency in the first language after they begin formal education in the dominant language. Others may use the heritage language consistently at home and with family, but receive little or no formal training in the heritage language, and thus may struggle with literacy skills or with using it in broader settings outside the home. An additional factor that affects the acquisition of learners is whether they show willingness or reluctance towards learning the heritage language. In any way, heritage speakers are characterized characterized by incomplete development or attrition in phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, vocabulary, semantics, and pragmatics. And this is due to insufficient linguistic input, limited contact during the sensitive period. Sometimes the parental involvement is not very strong, and the motivation levels are not very high. So, what if we compare heritage speakers with native speakers or foreign language learners? Let's see a table. And let's see the first line of this table. Native speakers have full range of interaction. Foreign language students have a limited interaction with the language, mainly in classroom, while heritage speakers are in the middle. Until 5 years old, they may have full interaction, but then when they go to school, input is drastically diminished with consequences for language learning. So heritage language learners, with regard to some aspects, are like native speakers. They have a home connection. They have some input, but in other ways are like foreign language learners in the sense that they have limited interaction. So, for native speakers, language acquisition continues until the age 18, while for heritage speakers, it slows down when children go to school. So heritage speakers become more proficient in the dominant language, while their heritage language diminishes. But how one can become a heritage speaker? So let us focus now on some numbers. This table displays the number of Greeks who moved abroad during the crisis. It's data from 2015. Actually, 354,000 have, 791 people from Greece have moved abroad. These numbers are high, and these people are heritage speakers, and they need to be educated in their heritage language. Let's now see the bigger picture of it. 5 to 7 million people are Greeks in diaspora, so this is a very big number. And if we focus on Greek heritage communities living in the United States, we can see that we have 3 million people of Greek origin live in the United States, while 350,000 people older than 5 spoke Greek at home. It is actually the largest ethnically Greek population outside Greece, according to data from the Department of State. Greek Americans have the highest concentrations in New York City, Boston, and Chicago, where I am actually, but have settled in major metropolitan areas across the United States. As far as Chicago is concerned, the 2000 census counted 93,140 people of Greek ancestry in the metropolitan region. Okay, so we've seen the numbers, but how and where these people receive education in their Greek heritage language? These learners attend either Saturday or Wednesday community schools, mainly run by the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. And the problem is that we don't know the exact number of these schools, nor the exact number of students. We are trying now to map all this, but we don't have this information yet. There are also some private day schools run by the church or other institutions, and there are some charter schools like the Odyssey Charter School in Delaware, open not only to Greek students. So this is how these people can receive education in Greek heritage language. It is true that until recently, we lacked systematic data about these communities. However, Valuable data concerning Greek heritage speakers in the United States and Russia were collected within the frame of the project that I coordinated, entitled Varieties of Greek as a Heritage Language, funded by European and national funds. The aim of the project was to study the productions of Greek heritage language speakers in the United States and in Russia in order to gain new knowledge on the Greek language capacity, also to document which linguistic features change and how in the particular speakers, and also to study the effect of different dominant languages, English and Russian in our case, on the same heritage language. The project resulted in the creation of the Greek heritage language corpus. Actually, no such resources were available for Greek as a heritage language, despite the large number of Greek heritage language speakers in diasporic communities. We saw the numbers earlier. The only other resource available for Greek was the RUEG corpus, compiled in 2018, which, however, contains parallel data from bilingual and monolingual speakers in English, German, Greek, Russian, and Turkish at Humboldt University. In their recent article, quite recent, Polinsky and Skonta suggest using corpus creation as a means to further investigate heritage learners and their connection to other types of language. Why so? Speech or spoken corpora have increasingly been used in investigating heritage languages due to the fact that heritage language speakers generally lack the metalinguistic knowledge about their heritage language, may use only the spoken modality, and their competence may be difficult to establish through other means. So corpora allow researchers and policymakers to see what's going on with heritage communities. And what is the Greek heritage language corpus? Actually, it's the first spoken corpus of Greek as a heritage language, including data from the first, second, and third generation Greek heritage speakers living in Chicago, Moscow, and St. Petersburg. It contains almost 145,000 tokens and approximately 90 hours of recordings. It consists of 3 subcorpora according to geographical criteria. The Moscow subcorpus consisting of approximately 23,000 tokens. The St. Petersburg subcorpus consisting of almost 30,000 tokens. And the Chicago subcorpus, which is by far the biggest, showing that people in the US have a better command of Greek as a heritage language, including 91,697 tokens. The Greek heritage language corpus is a freely available, carefully sampled, homogeneous, and rich in socio-linguistic metadata corpus, which contains digitized audio recordings, transcriptions of the elicited narratives and conversations, and also metadata, including demographic information, language learning history, self-rated proficiency, language use, and language learning motivational profiles of 69 Greek heritage language speakers. In this slide, you can see how the corpus looks like. So we have the metadata here. We have the narration in English. We have the narration in Greek. We have the conversation, and of course, the transcription symbols. This corpus was created by adopting Sinclair's basic principles for selecting corpus content and ensuring representativeness and authenticity. These principles are very shortly presented in what follows. Talking about its content, the content of the corpus was selected without regard for the language it contains, but according to its communicative function, and more precisely, the heritage speakers' language use in the 3 communities under study, Chicago, Moscow, and St. Petersburg. This way, it was ensured that data mirror the communicative patterns of these communities. Also, the Greek heritage speaker data collected for the compilation of this corpus was gathered from genuine communication, elicited through video stimuli, and also a structured interview with the heritage speakers that involved different discourse types. We had narration, we had description, we had argumentation, etc., etc. The Greek Heritage Language Corpus collection and compilation aimed at improving aspects of heritage language acquisition theories with respect to lexical, morphosyntactic, and pragmatic features of Greek heritage speakers varieties, and also contributing to the design of needs analysis-based tools and resources. More precisely, we wanted data for selection and structuring of teaching content for syllabi design. So that's why we used this corpus to the compilation of our syllabus. Also vocabulary teaching, grammar teaching, including prioritization of grammatical structures, etc., etc. And the content of this corpus actually reflects its purpose and supports research in heritage Greek. 3 were the major sampling criteria. First of all, geographical representation, and there was an effort to include Greek heritage speakers from different communities around the globe. Second, generational representation. So we wanted to have at least 3 generations of Greek heritage speakers, and also inclusion of a variety of genres. I talked about that earlier in my presentation. And you can see here how these metadata are presented in the corpus. So in this page, we have the location of this informer, we have the person who took the interview, also the date, also if the informant is a male or female, and it's his or her age group. Okay. And also the digital audio recorded sessions containing Greek, Russian, and English narrations and conversation with the researcher were transcribed using the standard orthographic transcription. Also, we adopted the conversation and analysis transcription technique with utterance as the basic unit in order to calculate the mean length of utterance in oral productions and thus investigate linguistic productivity in heritage speakers. Besides orthographic representations of words, other features characteristic of spoken language, for instance, hesitation phenomena, laughter, self-correction, and so on, were transcribed using predefined transcription conventions. The transcription symbols that we employed were adopted from Gavriilidou 2012. Let's give some more information. This corpus data consists of continuous threads of discourse which contain oral productions in the heritage speakers' dominant languages, English and Russian, as well as productions in Greek in both canonical and non-canonical and appropriate use of the language. The design and composition of the corpus is built based on specific structural criteria, includes a variety of text types, and is fully documented with information about its components and arguments following the framework for computer corpora of spoken discourse proposed by Leeds, Myers, and Thomas, and supported by Thomson. The digitized and transcribed corpus is continually being enriched with new data from school-age heritage learners and annotated in terms of lexical and morphosyntactic features by means of manual annotation, which is customized for specific error tagging. We want to turn this corpus into a learner corpus. This is our next project we are dealing with. The experience gained during the previous research fieldwork helped the research team to respond to the call of the Education Office of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America to undertake the compilation of a curriculum for teaching Greek as a heritage language in Greek community schools in the United States. The compilation of such curriculum addresses the major problem faced by both the Greek heritage language speakers living in the United States and their teachers, which is the lack of appropriate and needs analysis-based teaching resources and practices. So talking about needs, let me discuss now heritage language speakers' specialized pedagogical needs. Actually, heritage language speakers need specialized approaches as their knowledge, experience, and motivation to learn or relearn the heritage language in an academic setting are very different from those of the average L2 learners. However, despite the increasing efforts to record the learners' needs and the growing demand for heritage language courses, I think someone has his microphone open. Maybe it should be good to close it. The policies followed at the level of school education are not significantly differentiated from those for second or foreign language. And as a result, the findings of sociolinguistic research on heritage learners are not in line with the applied teaching practices. So this is a field where we have to work more. This has led to a large number of studies on the development of curricula and syllabi for heritage learners, especially for the most researched languages, such as Spanish, Russian, and Japanese. A fruitful debate was also about the type of the curriculum or study program that can be effective for heritage learners. This inevitably, of course, involves ideologies about what constitutes language, particularly in the case of heritage learners who display dialectal features in their discourse, and we had a lot of them in our corpus. Data from Spanish show a similar situation. But overall, previous literature indicated that a good practice is to compile proficiency-based curricula with an emphasis on macro level, meaning, and rich linguistic input. Such curricula promote non-structural teaching models, exploit the total linguistic repertoire of heritage language learners, and enhance cultural awareness, bilingual identity, and engagement in the community of heritage speakers. And what about Greek heritage speakers learning and teaching? Are there any teaching materials? The answer is yes. Already at the beginning of the new millennium, the Laboratory of Intercultural and Migratory Studies of the University of Greece and Professor Damanakis had developed a set of curricula for Greek in the diaspora, accompanied by rich educational material for all levels of Greek language proficiency and levels of education. The curricula took into account the cultural background of Greek learners in the diaspora and aimed to strengthen biculturalism. At the same time, however, they seem to constitute an attempt to combine the teaching of Greek as an L2 and L1, ignoring the needs of heritage learners. Similar efforts are being made by the Center for the Greek Language, and in recent years, specific syllabi have been also developed by various schools or kindergartens of the diaspora. For instance, we have the work of Matheoudaki at the Odyssey Charter School kindergarten. Since 2011, under the auspices of the Archdiocese of America, syllabi for basic and intermediate Greek have also been developed by the Institute of Modern Greek Studies of Manolis Triantafylidis Foundation. It was material for checkpoint A and checkpoint B levels. So then, why we had to create a new curriculum? Actually, because there was a need to respond to the heterogeneity of heritage language speakers, the specific needs of heritage speakers living in the specific context in the United States. We had also to address the demand for a framework for standardizing Greek language teaching. Teachers wanted that and were asking for that strongly. And also to take into consideration the principles and descriptors of the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages and macro approaches to teaching. Actually, these two are commonly used in teaching all heritage languages in the United States. So the compilation of this curriculum was assigned to the members of the Linguistics Laboratory Synmorphos of the Department of Greek Philology of Democritus University of Thrace, who had a lot of experience in the creation of curricula for teaching Greek as L1, L2 or heritage language. And I would like to thank very much Maria Mitsiaki for collaborating so smoothly for the creation and the compilation of this curriculum. So the compilation, the main goal was to develop a curriculum suitable for the empowerment of students from preschool to high school, so that as teenagers, they will have gained a good knowledge of the varieties of Greek, of basic academic skills, and be familiarized with the Greek culture. The new curriculum takes into account the previous projects run by educational institutions in Greece, so we incorporated all good practice and data, as well as recent linguistic research held in the frame of the project Varieties of Greek as a Heritage Language. It consists of an introductory reader-friendly text explaining the needs of heritage learners, heritage language students, the teaching methodology and the assessment of the learning process in preschool and school-age learners. Also, learning outcomes and objectives in the form of can-do statements accompanied by appropriate content and teaching material per age and level of proficiency. These are the syllabi, the 4 syllabi compiled. Also, information material for stakeholders, and diagnostic, placement, and assessment tools. Taking into account boundary steps for heritage language program building and adapting to the needs of for the heritage language curriculum development, the compilation of the curriculum we did was broken down into the following 4 stages. The phase 1 included gathering information and needs assessment for building arguments for the program's creation. I will return to this phase in the next 2 slides. For the moment, I would like to focus a little bit more on phase 2, 3, and 4. Phase 2 included finding resources. Building a new heritage language program, of course, requires not only the will to develop it, but also gathering significant resources, work and funds for its creation. In the development of the curriculum for teaching Greek as a heritage language, all the available resources were taken into account from the start. Those were financial, so we had the support of the Archdiocese of America, Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and also the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, and of course the funding from the Linguistics Laboratory of Democritus University of Thrace. We had also teaching resources, for instance, available websites, all the previous material, volunteers, teachers and parents who contributed to the curriculum design, organization of activities, etc., etc. And finally, we had also some cultural resources. For phase 3, which included investment in the professional development and training of teachers. Here I have to mention that Greek language teaching in the Greek Archdiocese schools is delivered either by volunteers without a degree in language teaching, so maybe a professor of physical education can teach Greek language, or a biologist can teach a Greek language, or someone without any degree at all. Or sometimes there are teachers without any previous experience experiencing heritage learning. Teaching. So this often results in a difficulty to analyze, interpret, and adjust to heritage language teaching needs, or to incorporate a variety of classroom strategies for adequately addressing heritage language learners' needs. It was thus deemed important by the Greek Archdiocese to have teachers trained to work with Greek heritage learners. For that purpose, it co-organized with my laboratory, the Syntax, Morphology, Phonology, and Semantics Laboratory of Democritus, University of Thrace, 3 30-hour seminars on various relevant topics during the school year, the academic year 2020-2021. Videos of these seminaries are available at the website of our laboratory. At the same time, for empowering the staff teaching at its schools and supporting teacher development in heritage language instruction, the Greek Archdiocese offered grants to teachers in order to attend a 420-hour lifelong learning program entitled Education and Certification in the Teaching of Greek as a Heritage Language of Teachers of the Greek Diaspora. This program was offered by the Curriculum Development Team within the frame of the Lifelong Learning Center of Democritus, University of Thrace. It was a success, and this early initiative continued during the academic year 21-22 and will have a third cycle next year, so that teachers are empowered in implementing the new curriculum. Phase 4 included the principles, purposes, and content, and these purposes and objectives are briefly presented in the introductory note of the curriculum and explain how learning is organized and mediated. Let us now turn to phase 1. Which is gathering information and needs assessment for building arguments for the program's creations. Actually, during a pilot study carried out in 2020, an electronic survey was completed by 50 educators teaching in various types of schools, and their opinions and preferences about a Greek heritage language curriculum were recorded. It is worth noting that most of them have been living in the United States of more than 20 years, do not have a degree in education or language teaching, and teach primarily in evening and Saturday schools to elementary and high school students. However, most of them have attended teacher training seminars offered by the University of Crete, the Center for the Greek Language, the Democritus University of Thrace, and the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute. The number of students they teach ranges from 6 to 15, with an average of 6 hours per week. The majority of them are very positive about the development of a new curriculum and its implementation. Furthermore, they strongly favor a curriculum that aims at developing communication skills, mainly listening and speaking, and to a lesser or much lesser extent, academic, critical, cultural, and digital skills. That is a problem. They also prefer assessing the learning process mainly through language tests and much less through portfolios, projects, and self-peer assessments, so this is a problem too. And finally, very useful are the teacher's observation that a Greek heritage language curriculum in the United States should distinguish levels of proficiency in Greek and provide for thematic continuity, have content that challenges, stimulates, and motivates students, be available in electronic format, assist in the composition of quality and appropriate teaching materials, have a cross-curricular and interdisciplinary orientation, be written, of course, in simple language, as many of them do not have a teaching degree, and be inclusive for second and third generation learners whose parents do not speak Greek at home and generally do not necessarily empower heritage learning. Of course, the above findings are of particular interest and were taken into account during the development of the curriculum. We also investigated learners and speakers, and we had semi-structured interviews which revealed that heritage speakers' sociocultural and linguistic characteristics are in line with the characteristics found in previous literature. The interviewees were first-generation speakers with limited communicative competence in Greek and awareness of their ethnocultural heritage as they come into contact with the language and culture. Second or even third-generation speakers and learners who had little knowledge of the language and culture, only a few words, basic knowledge of the roots, etc. And in the first case, heritage speakers display listening and speaking skills limited to communication in informal context, conversational competence in informal register, etc., but insufficient functional skills in contexts that require abstraction and complexity. In both cases, formal schooling coupled with the social needs of living in the host country limit exposure to the heritage language and the context of this use, while increasing the preference for the socially dominant language, English in our case. Okay, we can skip that and go to the next transparency. At the linguistic level, they show strengths in the basic vocabulary. Before going on, I would like to see how much time I have more. Boykan, if you can help me on that. Okay.
Μπορείς να το επαναλάβεις, δεν σε άκουσα, Ζωή, συγγνώμη.
Πόση ώρα έχω ακόμα για να ξέρω να οργανώσω?
Έχεις άλλα 8 λεπτά.
Πολύ ωραία, τέλεια. So, at the linguistic level, they show strengths in the basic vocabulary and in some idioms used in the intermediate environment of the home, often with dialectal nuances. For instance, we have found some works like Indousan, Apidi, θα σμίξουμε, αυτού, etc., etc. And also in aspects of grammar that are acquired early in infancy or childhood, while other aspects of grammatical structure, for instance, verb morphology, clitic morphology, case number, grammatical gender agreement, etc., etc., subordination, textual organization, prove to be more prone to incomplete acquisition of language attrition, particularly those to which they are exposed later at school. But after seeing the needs and the profiles of our informants, let's talk a little bit about the curriculum that was created, taking into consideration what teachers and speakers had to say. So, the learning outcomes are organized on the basis of 3 different levels of Greek proficiency, which are matched to the school grades. So we have kindergarten, which corresponds to pre-K1, novice level, which corresponds to K1, K2, and K3, and intermediate low, which corresponds to K4 and K5, and intermediate mid to high, which corresponds to classes grades K6 to K8. In this table, you can see the thematic units of its syllabus. You can see here the 4 syllabi. The learning outcomes are also classified under the 11 to 13 thematic units we saw in the previous slides, which are recycled at the 3 levels. For example, the first theme is classified and recycled as follows: Γεια σας, hello, at kindergarten. Let's get to know each other, ας γνωριστούμε καλύτερα, novice, and also personal stories in America and Greece, προσωπικές ιστορίες από την Ελλάδα και την Αμερική at the intermediate levels, so that it is expanded and reviewed based on the degree of proficiency of students. The learning outcomes within the 4 syllabi, kindergarten, novice, intermediate low, and intermediate mid to high, comply with the specification of ACTFL World Readiness Standards and are articulated around the following fields: communication, which includes interaction, interpretation, presentation; culture practices, which includes practices and products; academic content, which includes connections, acquisition of new language; and comparisons, which include language and culture, and 5 communities, which include the Greek community and what we do among it so that we have lifelong learning. Therefore, attention is given to both to the communication and academic skills of students, as well as to cultures, while promoting linguistic and cultural comparisons, the connection with experience in the Greek community and lifelong learning. So we try to combine all that. Each thematic unit, in addition to the table containing the can-do statements, includes a second table with a teaching content. It includes the context, genre, grammatical awareness, meaning pronunciation, spelling, morphology, syntax, vocabulary, as well as proposed language learning strategies and intercultural and dialectical awareness activities that should form a part of the teaching methodology. For the drafting of the can-do statements, the success and proficiency indicator criteria of the Greek as a second language in Cyprus curriculum, as well as other syllabi for heritage languages in America and worldwide were considered. You can see the reference in the transparency. In addition, its syllabus includes some culturally related themes with the corresponding can-do statements that offer teachers the opportunity to use historical events, for instance, 28th of October, 25th of March, etc., or celebration, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. Why? In order to both to culturally engage students and develop their language skills. So let's navigate a little bit in the curriculum to see how it looks. You can see here the tables. Here is the second table, as I told you before. And you can see here we give very rich material to help teachers build, organize the class. So these can-do statements can be considered like proficiency benchmarks, performance indicators, and also provide examples to students for their learning. And we can use them as in order to describe what learners can do, but not as a checklist of tasks to be demonstrated. And I think I will skip that so that I have time to say a few more. And also educators set daily learning targets and incorporate statements in lesson to make learning transparent. And learners set learning goals and chart their own progress, so they acquire self-monitoring with the use of these can-do statements. Let's focus now on the 4 syllabi, and I will start with the kindergarten syllabus. The kindergarten syllabus aims to provide rich auditory input from the Greek language and basic cultural elements in order to lay the basic foundation for the further learning of Greek by young learners. How? With playful activities, role-playing games, dramatization, music, songs, drawing, and others. At the same time, it aims at the development of first basic vocabulary, the cultivation of phonological awareness, and the emerging literacy and reading skills, the strengthening of the ability to formulate hypotheses, the development of creativity, but also wider socio-emotional development. The syllabus for the beginner level aims to familiarize students with elementary communication contexts and the corresponding Greek vocabulary and grammatical structures, so as to develop basic communication skills and cultural awareness. At the same time, it aims at the completion of the literacy process, learners' exposure to other literacies, such as digital, mathematical, etc. So we work a lot with STEM, the cultivation of reading, familiarization with basic elements of Greek culture, etc., but also development of the ability to mediate their experiences between Greek and English. At the intermediate level, language and communication skills are further developed, bearing in mind learners' age and cognitive maturation, But at the same time, it is proposed that they become increasingly involved in Greek culture and in comparisons with the culture in which they live and interact in America. The aim of the can-do statements reflect the transition from the communication skills, so everyday language, to academic skills, a more elevated language of media, science, etc. And this is why multiliteracies are promoted, such as digital and media literacy, creative literacy, through literature, etc., etc. So, at the end of this presentation, we should mention 3 basic novelties of the curriculum. It is rich in context, it is flexible and allows teachers to take initiatives in teaching. And finally, we have to mention the fact that it is needs-based and comes to address the characteristics of a very specific learning group, heritage speakers living in the United States. And where do we go from here? Next steps include intensive teacher professional development, and that's the reason why I'm in Chicago this year. Also, the creation of teaching material by teacher. Also, the creation of teaching materials for vocabulary teaching in the frame of a PhD thesis, which I supervise. The creation of a repository for strong, useful material and good practice. We're working on that right now. And the idea is to create an interacting practice community which will share good practice and solutions to the problems faced while teaching. Finally, the evaluation of the curriculum will follow. We don't have yet the frame for the evaluation, but we are working on that. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for attending this talk. Please feel free to ask any question or give your feedback. And I would like to thank once more my partners, Maria Mitsiaki and Lydia Mitic, for working so hard together and so smoothly. Thank you very much. Thanks again to the organizing committee for inviting me here. Thank you.
Σε ευχαριστούμε, Ζωή. Ήταν πραγματικά εξαιρετική η παρουσίασή σου. Πρέπει να ζητήσουμε συγγνώμη γιατί κάποιο θέμα είχαμε με το Zoom. Για λίγα λεπτά είχε πέσει το σύστημα, οπότε για αυτόν τον λόγο όσοι είστε στην Ελλάδα δεν μπορούσατε να συνδεθείτε. Θέλω να σας ενημερώσω ότι μόλις τελειώσει η συνεδρία αυτή θα αναρτηθεί η ομιλία της κυρίας Γαβριλίδου στον ιστότοπο του συνεδρίου. Και τώρα οι ερωτήσεις σας. Ο Σπύρος Μοσχονάς. Κύριε Μοσχονά.
Καλησπέρα. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την ομιλία. Να ζητήσω συγγνώμη γιατί μεγάλο μέρος της το έχασα. Δεν μπορούσα να συνδεθώ. Οπότε η ερώτηση, Ζωή, είναι κάπως προκάτ. Και η ερώτηση μου είναι ποιες διαφορές έχουμε, αν έχουμε μεταξύ τη διδασκαλίας της ελληνικής ως heritage γλώσσας, ως δεύτερης γλώσσας ή ως ξένης γλώσσας. Παλιότερα υπήρχε και η άποψη Δαμανάκης και λοιποί ότι τα ελληνικά πρέπει να είναι διαφορετικά άμα διδάσκονται σε παλινοστούντες. Και πάλι μπορεί να είναι άστοχη ερώτηση γιατί έχασα μέρος της αρχής.
Ευχαριστώ, Σπύρο, πάρα πολύ. Ναι, τα εξήγησα αυτά κάπου στην αρχή της ομιλίας που ξεχώριζα τα 3 είδη. Έχουν μεταξύ τους, δεν πειράζει κανένα πρόβλημα. Έχουν μεταξύ τους, έλεγα, ομοιότητες και διαφορές. Για παράδειγμα, μοιράζονται κοινά χαρακτηριστικά με τους native speakers, γιατί έχουν ήδη και αυτοί κάποια επαφή με τη γλώσσα, όχι όμως τόσο εκτενή επαφή όσο οι native speakers. Με τους foreign language speakers όσο μαθαίνουν και αυτή τη γλώσσα, αλλά έχουν και κάποια επαφή από το σπίτι. Άρα, λοιπόν, υπάρχουν κοινά χαρακτηριστικά, αλλά εν συντομία να πω ότι οι ομιλητές μιας γλώσσας πολιτισμικής κληρονομιάς έχουν ήδη κάποια γνώση της γλώσσας. Άρα, λοιπόν, δεν θα ξεκινήσουν from the scratch όπως κάποιος που μαθαίνει την ελληνική ως ξένη ή ως δεύτερη. Επίσης, έχουν έναν πολιτισμικό δεσμό που αυτό μπορεί να είναι το κλειδί για να το αξιοποιήσεις διδακτικά. Άρα, λοιπόν, μπορείς να φτιάξεις υλικό που να πατά σε εμπειρίες προηγούμενες κτλ. Άρα, αυτά είναι τα δύο έτσι βασικά χαρακτηριστικά που τους διαφοροποιούν. Επίσης, έχουν attrition, δηλαδή πρέπει να δουλέψεις και με αυτό τι γίνεται. Έχουν την ελληνική προφορά, όμως χάνεται σιγά-σιγά η προφορά αυτή. Έχουν το δικό τους κώδικα που κάνουν τα long blends, ας πούμε, πού θα πας, θα πάω 3 μπλόκια παρακάτω ή θα πάρω το κάρο να πάω. Όλα αυτά λοιπόν μπορείς να τα αξιοποιήσεις και να νιώσουν ότι είναι η διδασκαλία που απευθύνεται μόνο σε αυτούς. Αυτή ήταν η λόγη που κάναμε για ένα καινούριο curriculum. Αλλιώς δεν είχε νόημα.
Αυτό που στο μυαλό μου ήταν μήπως είναι κάπως ταμπού όρος δεύτερη γλώσσα, τα ελληνικά ως second language σε αυτό το περιβάλλον. Γι' αυτό έκανα περισσότερο αυτή την ερώτηση. Κοίτα,
εμείς που ζούμε εδώ πέρα, τέλος πάντων στη Θράκη, για μας δεν είναι ταμπού το να είναι τα ελληνικά δεύτερη γλώσσα. Έτσι, όχι. Ίσα-ίσα και έχουμε γράψει και έχουμε μιλήσει γι' αυτό.
Παρομοίως. Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Ζωή.
Την ξέρουμε τη δουλειά, όντως. Ευχαριστώ και εγώ.
Ωραία. Κυρία Γιαννακίδου, σας ακούμε. Αλλά δεν σας ακούμε.
Μικρόφωνο.
Ωραία.
Ναι, τώρα το μικρόφωνο. Ναι, χαίρομαι, χαιρετώ και το ακροατήριο. Συγχαρητήρια, κυρία Γαβριλίδου, εξαιρετική παρουσίασή σας. Και να πω επίσης ότι είμαι πάρα πολύ χαρούμενη. I'm very excited to be hosting Zoe Gavriilidou as a visiting professor this year at the University of Chicago, at the Center for Hellenic Studies and the Department of Linguistics. Αυτό, δεν ξέρω τώρα, να την κάνω την ερώτηση στα ελληνικά ή στα αγγλικά.
Νομίζω ότι όλοι μιλάνε. Αναστασία, από ό,τι είδα το κοινό, δεν ξέρω.
Ωραία. Επομένως, θα ήθελα, σκοπός έτσι και της παραμονής της ζωής εδώ είναι ακριβώς να δούμε και στην πράξη πώς όλες αυτές οι θέσεις για τα προγράμματα μπορούν να υλοποιηθούν. Και θα ήθελα επίσης να ρωτήσω στο πλαίσιο αυτό, πότε, σχετίζεται λίγο η ερώτησή μου με την προηγούμενη ερώτηση, σε ποιο σημείο πάβει ένας heritage speaker να είναι heritage speaker και να γίνεται second language learner. Καταρχάς, πιστεύουμε ότι μπορεί να υπάρξει αυτό. Εγώ πιστεύω ότι με βάση αυτά που βλέπουμε στο Σικάγο, για παράδειγμα, δηλαδή τρίτη, τέταρτη γενιά, που δεν μιλούν και που ο πολιτισμικός δεσμός είναι κατά κάποιο τρόπο μικρός ή επιφανειακός, δεν επισκέπτονται την Ελλάδα, δηλαδή αναγνωρίζουν ίσως μερικές λέξεις που σχετίζονται με το φαγητό κλπ. Σε αυτή την περίπτωση θα μπορούσε ένας heritage speaker να θεωρηθεί ότι είναι second language learner και επομένως να διδαχτεί τη γλώσσα με τις κλασικές μεθόδους του second language learning. Αυτή είναι μία ερώτηση. Και η δεύτερη ερώτηση, που ίσως να έχει να κάνει και με αυτό, έχει να κάνει με αυτό το πρόγραμμα που έχουμε ξεκινήσει, το Refresh Your Greek. Αν θα μπορούσες να πεις κάποια πράγματα για αυτό το πρόγραμμα, το οποίο απευθύνεται σε adult language learners, για τους οποίους η διαδικασία του acquisition είναι πλέον πολύ περασμένη. Έτσι. Και θα ήθελα λίγο να συγκρίνουμε αυτές τις κατηγορίες. Τις κατηγορίες δηλαδή αυτού που έχει χάσει σχεδόν τη γλώσσα, δηλαδή ο heritage speaker ο οποίος έχει πολύ λίγη γνώση των ελληνικών και ο adult speaker ο οποίος επίσης χρειάζεται να κάνει refresh στα ελληνικά του, γιατί το μόνο που του έχει μείνει είναι κάποιες λέξεις ενδεχομένως, αλλά δεν μπορεί να χτίσει προτάσεις. Ευχαριστώ.
Ναι, ευχαριστώ και εγώ για την ερώτηση αυτή, Αναστασία, και βέβαια για την πρόσκληση να είμαι εδώ στο Σικάγο. Να αρχίσω από το εύκολο, από το Refresh Your Greek. Είναι μια δραστηριότητα που ξεκινήσαμε το Κέντρο Ελληνικών Σπουδών του Πανεπιστημίου του Σικάγο, που είναι διευθύντρια Αναστασία, το Γενικό Προξενείο της Ελλάδος στο Σικάγο και το Εργαστήριο Γλωσσολογίας Συμμόρφωση του Δημοκριτίου Πανεπιστημίου Θράκης, με εθελοντές από το Δημοκριτίο Πανεπιστήμιο, φοιτητές, οι οποίοι θα διδάξουν την ελληνική σε ενήλικους οι οποίοι θέλουν να φρεσκάρουν τα ελληνικά τους. Εδώ βέβαια περισσότερο δεν θα είναι μια τυπική διδασκαλία, θα είναι περισσότερο συζήτηση, θα είναι περισσότερο έτσι, γιατί δεν θέλουμε να τρομάξουμε τον κόσμο, ίσα-ίσα θέλουμε να τον κάνουμε να αγαπήσει και να για δες, την έχω αφήσει αυτή τη γλώσσα για να δω, έμαθα και κάτι καινούριο. Έτσι, άρα λοιπόν αυτός είναι ο στόχος. Άρα αυτό είναι κάτι εντελώς διαφορετικό. Εκεί θα κάνουμε adult education 100% και θα είναι περισσότερο oral, θα είναι multimedia, θα είναι πολυτροπικό υλικό για να μπορέσουμε να τους προσεγγίσουμε. Το άλλο τώρα ζήτημα, αν μπορούμε να πούμε ότι τα παιδιά της δεύτερης και τρίτης γενιάς, κυρίως δεύτερη και τρίτη, είναι αυτοί που σιγά σιγά χάνουν. Παρόλο που τα δικά σου παιδιά δεν το έχουν χάσει καθόλου και θα μας πεις το μυστικό μετά. Χάνουν λοιπόν τα ελληνικά και ξέρουν λέξεις. Ήδη είπες ότι ξέρουν λέξεις, ξέρουν κάποιες λέξεις και ήδη είπες ότι έχουν στο μυαλό τους ότι μπορεί να πάνε και στην εκκλησία το Πάσχα ενδεχομένως κτλ. Έτσι. Άρα λοιπόν, αυτό τους διαφοροποιεί αυτόματα. Διδακτικά δηλαδή, εμείς που ασχολούμαστε πολύ με τη διδακτική, θα χρησιμοποιήσουμε όλο αυτό το κομμάτι για να πατήσουμε και να χτίσουμε τη νέα γνώση. Αυτό είναι που τους διαφοροποιεί. Στην πράξη, δεν ξέρω. Ενώ το άλλο υλικό, αν ήταν πολύ formal και ήταν για δεύτερη γλώσσα κτλ., ενδεχομένως να μην κινητοποιούσε τόσο πολύ. Τώρα έχεις κάποια κλειδιά για να ξεκλειδώσεις το motivation να μάθουν τα ελληνικά. Εκεί βρίσκεται η διαφοροποίηση.
Αλλά είναι ουσιαστική η διαφοροποίηση και συγγνώμη δηλαδή που κάνω και follow-up. Για παράδειγμα, ένας πολύ έντονος φιλέλληνας, για παράδειγμα, κάποιος που θαυμάζει, ξένος ομιλητής, έτσι, την ελληνική κουλτούρα και πηγαίνει και στην εκκλησία και έχει Έλληνες φίλους κτλ. Και ενδεχομένως αναγνωρίζει και λέξεις και είναι έτσι, του αρέσει, θέλει να είναι μέρος της κουλτούρας. Και αυτός βρίσκεται την ίδια, δηλαδή τίθεται το ερώτημα, ποια είναι η διαφορά ανάμεσα σε αυτόν τον άνθρωπο και σε έναν Έλληνα που μόλις περιγράψαμε, ο οποίος έχει έτσι πολύ περιορισμένη ή δύο level εξοικείωση με την κουλτούρα. Και στην περίπτωση, ας πούμε, του ξένου, η εξοικείωση με την κουλτούρα είναι περισσότερο συνειδητή, γιατί είναι κάτι που το επιλέγει. Ενώ στην περίπτωση του Έλληνα είναι κάτι το οποίο είναι δεδομένο, αλλά δεν είναι τόσο motivating, όσο θα είναι στην περίπτωση του second language learner, ο οποίος θέλει πραγματικά να μάθει για την κουλτούρα.
Αναστασία, θα έχει πολύ νόημα να δοκιμάσουμε αυτό το υλικό και με τέτοιες περιπτώσεις. Ξέρω, υπάρχουν όντως εδώ στην Αμερική και στην Ευρώπη κάποιες τέτοιες. Να δούμε τι θα μας δώσει. Πιστεύω ότι θα ήταν με μικρές τροποποιήσεις, θα μπορούσε να χρησιμοποιηθεί και ενδεχομένως, για να σου απαντήσω και στο αρχικό σε ερώτημα, και το αντίστροφο. Αλλά νομίζω ότι αυτό είναι έτσι πιο εξειδικευμένο. Εντάξει, ναι, είδα την διαφοροποίηση, ίσως όχι. Να πω βέβαια σε κάτι που έθεσε σε σχέση με το bound, με το δεσμό, με την ελληνικότητα. Ότι εγώ έχω διαπιστώσει, και εσύ φαντάζομαι περισσότερο εδώ, ότι τελικά αυτό εδώ δεν αφορά τόσο τη γλώσσα, δηλαδή η ελληνική ταυτότητα συνδέεται περισσότερο με το θρησκευτικό κομμάτι, με το ότι πηγαίνουν στην εκκλησία κτλ., παρά με το ότι μιλούν ελληνικά. Όταν ήμουν πρόπερση το Πάσχα εκεί με τη Λίδια και πήγαμε στην εκκλησία και ακούσαμε Jesus Christ has risen. Yes, he's risen indeed. Δεν ξέρω πώς το λέει. Εμείς πάθαμε ένα σοκ, έτσι. Δεν περιμέναμε ότι θα το ακούσουμε αυτό. Άρα τελικά καταλήγει να είναι θρησκεία και εμένα αυτό με λυπεί, ότι η γλώσσα μπαίνει σε δεύτερη μοίρα που θα έπρεπε να είναι το ανάποδο.
Ναι, είναι αυτό ένα πρόβλημα με τους Έλληνες της Αμερικής. Εντάξει, ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Hopefully θα το λύσουμε αυτό το πρόβλημα και θα συμβάλλουμε κάπως θετικά. Ναι.
Ως μη φυσικός ομιλητής της ελληνικής και μεγάλος λάτρης της ελληνικής γλώσσας, πρέπει να σας πω ότι ο χρόνος μας τελείωσε. Και ότι ξεκινάμε με την επόμενη συνεδρία, με την πέμπτη συνεδρία. Ζωή, σε ευχαριστούμε.
Εγώ ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Καλή συνέχεια.
Ευχαριστώ.